Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies, and man, some big stuff has happened. Jeff Hoffman is now a Toronto Blue Jay. Why did the Phillies pass? We'll break it down on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on the air on the radio with 97.5 The Fanatic here in Philadelphia, talking all Philly sports for 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for the past 3 seasons, and this is now into my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form. If you're checking us out on YouTube, go to the Locked On Phillies YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. It will get you notifications when new episodes are posted. Appreciate that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. For big upsets, the game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Big Birds game on Sunday. That's why I'm wearing my Birds hat now. But we've got some big stuff to get into here for the Philadelphia Phillies. The dominoes of the Philadelphia Phillies offseason have begun to fall. Okay, if that sounded overly dramatic, I just finished watching Squid Game, so I'm kind of in the dramatic mood. But these are big things that have just happened for the Philadelphia Phillies. A lot of stuff to break down. First and foremost, we're going to talk about Jeff Hoffman signing with the Toronto Blue Jays and why the Philadelphia Phillies passed, or why I believe they passed. Next, we're going to talk about the Philadelphia Phillies arbitration decisions as far as contract agreements. That says a lot that the Phillies were able to come to contract agreements with everybody without going to arbitration. Or at least I think it does. You can let me know if you agree or not. And then we're going to talk about what's next, because every time you have these updates in roster construction or changes of guys available, you got to take a look at what's the next move. Where are they heading now? Where do you point the ship when the winds change? Dude, I'm being super dramatic today. Let's just get to the baseball. Jeff Hoffman signs a 3-year, $33 million contract with the Toronto Blue Jays. He is no longer a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. First and foremost, Jeff Hoffman, thank you so much for your time here in Philadelphia. It was a magical run to have you as part of this team for the couple years that you were here. Incredible story. Wish him all the best. I have no ill will towards Jeff Hoffman. Nobody should. Dude got paid. Dude went where he got paid, right? I got no problem with that. He was deserving. He was an all-star last year. Say what you want about the postseason last year from the whole bullpen, but I'm not going to pretend like Jeff Hoffman wasn't really good in his time with the Philadelphia Phillies. So best of luck to Jeff Hoffman in Toronto. Some people might be wondering, though, why in the world did the Philadelphia Phillies not sign him back? 3 years, $33 million, $11 a year. That's not crazy for a high-end, top-of-the-market reliever. That's not starter money. We talked all offseason about, well, some teams want to make Jeff Hoffman a starter, so he's going to get starter money. And the Phillies, they don't want to play in that market because they see him as a reliever. And then he gets reliever money. And good reliever money, but still, it wasn't like, well, we can't afford this. The reason we didn't get it done is the dollar amount. It wasn't like he got 3 years, $60 million. He got 3 years, $33. So immediately my antenna goes up. I say, okay, it's not the dollar amount. Well, what else do we know that it could be? And when I initially saw the report that Jeff Hoffman was signing with the Toronto Blue Jays, my thought was what I think a lot of people's thoughts were. Well, they didn't want to go 3 years. They see a guy that they don't know what his shelf life is because it's such a unique situation. Now, they found Jeff Hoffman, and he's had ups and downs in his career, and they think he's good, but how long will he be good for? How much do you trust that to be the guy he is for 3 more years and everything like that? You could kind of rationalize that a little bit. But even that didn't totally sit right with me because 3 more years of Jeff Hoffman, I don't think is a crazy investment. This team's going to be competing for 3 more years at least. So you're bringing in a high-end reliever to the bullpen that's going to lock stuff down. Like, even if Jeff Hoffman regresses, he's probably not going to stink in the next 3 years, right? He's probably going to be at the very least, serviceable. So even the years, I was just like, okay, well, if you would put that contract in front of me, now, this is also probably why I'm not the general manager or president of baseball operations for the Philadelphia Phillies, because if you put that Jeff Hoffman contract in front of me, I'm signing that. I'm taking pen to paper, 3 years, $33 million deal. Jeff, come back and toss for the Phillies, right? So I could understand like somewhat the argument about, well, that's too long. That's too many years. But the real interesting part of the equation here was announced after the announcement of Hoffman signing with the Blue Jays. So another report comes out, which is fascinating and intriguing and probably explanatory of why the Philadelphia Phillies did what they did, more so than the years or the dollar amount or anything. There was a report that Jeff Hoffman had a deal agreed to for more money. I believe it was $40 million with the Baltimore Orioles. You might say, well, where in the world did that deal go? They saw something on the physical with Jeff Hoffman that kind of scared him a little bit, kind of weirded him out. And they got cold feet. They said, no, we're not doing the deal. Contract's done. You're back on the market. So he had a deal with the Baltimore Orioles, and the physical got rejected. And then he goes and he signs that 3 years, $33 million deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. Less money to play there in Toronto. And obviously, like, they're not going to offer him the same contract if that same contract was one that he did not get because the physical wasn't good enough. You're going to cut a dollar amount on that. But that's sneaky. Well, not sneaky in like a bad way, but that's like a sneaky, interesting part of this offseason. The Philadelphia Phillies, maybe they dodged a bullet. Maybe this was absolutely the right situation. And maybe this tells you a little bit more about what their offseason plans were, right? Like, they go out and they get Jordan Romano. They get Joe Ross. They bring in these guys to add to the bullpen. And you're wondering, well, Jordan Romano, why don't you go get Jeff Hoffman? Why don't you bring him in as your premier reliever? I don't know what the injury issue is with Jeff Hoffman. I don't know what it would be to mess up his physical. Now, I would guess because he's a pitcher, it's arm related. I know that's not a crazy get. You might be saying, "Oh, be careful on that limb you're out on there, Connor." I know, but like, I don't think it's lower body. I don't know if it's back. I would imagine it's elbow or shoulder. That's the stuff that freaks you out about a pitcher. And if the Phillies had these concerns, and I'm sure they did, because if this is popping up on physicals of teams that are trying to sign him for the first time, the people in-house know about it. The Philadelphia Phillies know about it. Hell, this might even explain what went on in the postseason last year and why he just was not himself. Maybe there is something going on injury-wise, or maybe it's just something like overly precautionary from these teams. But whatever the case, Baltimore saw it too. And you can't fault the Philadelphia Phillies for moving on, from not re-signing a player that's going to make all-star caliber money that another team's going to reject the physical. You can't do that. If there are questions about that guy, they have the right to say, hey, man, like, we know he's a great pitcher, but you understand why we didn't sign him. I'm not saying it's the right move. I'm not saying it's the wrong move. I'm saying it's an understandable move considering what we found out about a physical being denied by the Baltimore Orioles on Jeff Hoffman. So I wonder how long the Phillies knew that that was going to be an issue. I wonder when they decided that they were not going to bring back Jeff Hoffman. They might have known this for months. They might have known from the second he hit free agency, hey, we're not doing this. Jordan Romano was the first move they made this offseason, bringing in a high-level reliever with two high-level relievers on the market that you had in-house last year with Jeff Hoffman and Carlos Estevez, bringing in a different guy than those guys rather than paying one of them and getting that short up first. Tells you they might have known something. Now that you look back, the puzzle pieces seem to fit a little bit better on the way the Philadelphia Phillies have been doing it. This is one, if there's one lesson we take out of all of this, right? For all those re-sign Jeff Hoffman people. And hey, at reliever money, I was one of them. I just told you at the start of this episode, $33 million, 3 years, Jeff Hoffman, you put that contract in front of me, deal. We got a deal. He's coming back to the Philadelphia Phillies. So I'm not saying like, oh, you're crazy for wanting Jeff Hoffman back, but there's so much stuff under the surface of what we get information to that we just never see until deals get made or reports come out and stuff like that. So this whole Dave Dombrowski's doing nothing, the Phillies are running it back, this, that, and the other thing that we see from the outside perspective here, not being in the room in these negotiations, we don't know jack with some of this stuff. Now, I'm not saying all of this stuff. I'm not saying the fans are always wrong. Nobody knows but Dombrowski. Like, no, there's sometimes when we're right. There's sometimes when Dave Dombrowski's wrong. There's sometimes when we nail stuff from the outside looking in. So it's not a fan base, you're always wrong. It's just sometimes when weird stuff is happening or when you're trying to figure out what the plan is, there are things they see that we don't. So that's why I always try and exercise patience, caution when it comes to evaluating an offseason in January. We'll have a very different conversation in February and in March as we get closer to spring training, as things get more concrete. But The Phillies now, well, they have missed their opportunity to bring back Jeff Hoffman, or maybe they passed on the opportunity to bring back Jeff Hoffman. If I had to tell you if this was a smart move or not, I would tell you that it is. Because if you're going to give that level of money and 3 more years to a guy whose physical is questionable to one franchise, well, you're going to be in a situation where you're taking a major risk. And I think the Philadelphia Phillies said for that money, well, we could take a smarter risk for cheaper and probably have the same type of concerns, right? Or not the same type of concerns like injury, but just like, let's say you get a lesser pitcher that you know is healthy and available and you pay him less versus a guy you're going to pay a lot in Jeff Hoffman, who could have arm issues, who could have shoulder issues, who could have whatever physical issues that caused the Orioles to take that deal off the table. And you're going to have him for 3 years, and maybe that breaks down and you just threw $33 million to the wind. It's not a Jeff Hoffman skill kind of thing. It's the nature of professional sports. It sucks because Hoffman was really, really good here. I think he's a great guy. And again, wishing him all the best. But it seems like the Philadelphia Phillies made a prudent move to not re-sign Jeff Hoffman. And if you had told me that I was going to say that a week ago, I would have called myself crazy. Or I would have said it was dollar amount. Or I would have said it was number of years. But I never would have guessed that this was the way that this whole thing would have gone down. So the Phillies could, by all means, be in a better spot because of their decision not to bring Jeff Hoffman back. So, got to have some faith in Dave Dombrowski. Got to believe that that was something that they were seeing. Got to believe that they made a conscious call on that one to say, a little nervous about the physical, a little nervous about the dollar amount, a little nervous about the years, the whole equation of that. So, a big move. And we're going to talk later on in the episode, like our final segment, we're going to talk about like the breakdown of what that means now. I tried not to get into it too much there because we are going to give a full segment to that of like where the Philadelphia Phillies go from here. But another little interesting tidbit where we've reached like the kind of read the tea leaves section of the offseason, not the Jeff Hoffman thing. That's concrete. We got the report on it. But what's next? I think I have a very different perspective than the average person who sees this type of news for the Phillies. And I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but I'm going to state my case coming up next on the arbitration decisions that the Philadelphia Phillies made and why it's kind of interesting to me. We'll discuss that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Game Time because I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy, any of that great stuff that you can get a ticket to. Well, one of my favorite memories was last year. It was amazing. Now, I know the Eagles season didn't go great, but going to that Buffalo Bills game where they beat them in overtime, the Eagles beat them in overtime, that felt like a playoff atmosphere. It was great. Got my tickets through Game Time. Went to a Sixers game last year before they stunk. Got my tickets through Game Time. You have an Eagles playoff game tomorrow. You can get tickets through Game Time. Go ahead and check it out. They've made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They got everything. They'll give you the views from your seat. They'll give you the Game Time guarantee, so if you find seats in the same row and section for less, 110% of the difference. I mean, they'll cover you with the best ticketing policy in the world. They got it. They're going to make sure that your experience is easy, simple. You can get the game for the best price possible and the best seat possible. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. And you download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You know what you're going to get. $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? You know it. It's Game Time. So this is another interesting little tidbit that happened recently that I want to get into. The Philadelphia Phillies had their arbitration deadline. Well, everybody had the arbitration deadline earlier this week, like 2 days ago, 1 day ago, whatever it is. Bottom line, I know I read the date. I think it was January 9th was the actual drop dead date. So it's the 11th now. So yeah, 2 days ago. And some teams agreed with some players and other players are going to arbitration. By the way, if you're not familiar, I know I've explained this before, but we may have some new listeners. So bear with me while I just break this down. Arbitration eligible players are players who are not up for free agency, but they're going to have enough service time with the organization that they deserve arbitration. So what that means is you're going to be tendered a contract or you're going to go to arbitration if you have that right. And you're going to submit a figure and the Phillies are going to submit a figure. And then if you guys can't come to terms on that, you're going to go to a judge, like an independent arbiter, who's going to say, yeah, I like this number. I like the player's number. I like the team's number. I like a number in between. Basically, that's how they break it down. It's a negotiation for what you deserve salary-wise with the team you're currently on. So it's basically a free agency negotiation, but only with one team. You can't go anywhere else. But what you can do to avoid arbitration is if your figures are so similar, or they're the exact same, or you're willing to negotiate, you talk to the Phillies and you say, hey, I want $1.5 million to play this year. What a dream that would be, huh? And they say, well, we were going to pay you like 145, but that's not too far off. I mean, what's $50K between friends? Or is that $500K? I'm not a math guy. So they go ahead and give that to you, and you say, okay, 1.5 deal, shake on that. We're not going to arbitration. We've come to an agreement ourselves. So we don't need a mediator for this. The Philadelphia Phillies announced on Thursday that they have agreed to one-year contracts and avoided arbitration with Jesus Luzardo, Ranger Suarez, Alec Bohm, Edmundo Sosa, Bryson Stott, and Brandon Marsh. That is every player that they had that was arbitration eligible. They agreed to deals with all of them. Not a single player is going to arbitration with the Philadelphia Phillies this year. Now, you might say, okay, cool. Well, they've just got a bunch of agreeable players, and they're willing to pay guys, and John Middleton's rich, and they're a great organization. This isn't exactly the most normal thing. Now, I'll just tell you, I've been doing this for 3 years. This is my 4th year now. So 4th off season, whatever it is. I've been doing this for a couple years. And before I did this podcast, I've been doing sports talk radio for a while. And before I did that, I followed the Phillies forever. In the time that I've been doing this podcast, they haven't had a year where they've had nobody go to arbitration. There's always somebody. There's always one or two. And you might say, well, that makes no difference, really, because ultimately these guys are under team control. Well, if they go to arbitration, you're going to have to wait. And you're going to have to have a judge look over the figures. And they're going to hand down a verdict. It's not like a verdict like a criminal verdict, but you know what I mean. They're going to give you a number that's what you got to pay them. They're going to give you this drop-dead number, and that takes time. There's weeks involved of them getting the figures in. The judge has to look through it, or the independent arbiter, to use the proper term, and they're going to run through the numbers. And that way, it slows down the process of knowing what you're going to pay these players. I'm reading some tea leaves here, so I could be wrong. But my thought on this is it's very interesting that the Phillies have all these guys not going to arbitration. Not a single guy goes. And I think they want to know exactly what they're paying these guys early, right? They want to know now what their payroll is going to be with the guys that they have, because that gives them more flexibility to do what they'd like to do. Now, it's not a huge dollar amount, right? It might be $500,000 here. It might be $1 million here between players. But I wonder if they're trying to get all of the little stuff off the plate so they can evaluate if there's a big move to be made. And a very interesting name on there is Alec Bohm, who avoided arbitration. Now, you could trade Alec Bohm, and he could go to arbitration with his new team. Like, that's not that big of a deal. Like I told you, Jesus Luzardo was one of the names. The Phillies traded for him this offseason, and they went to arbitration with, well, they would have gone to arbitration with him, but they settled the deal with him. So you can trade a player, but it may be slightly easier to move a player if you have them on a set dollar figure, and you could say to whoever wants to acquire Alec Bohm, hey, here's what he's going to cost you this year. Here's his dollar amount for this season. We already took care of all that, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, I don't think that's a major sticking point, but I do think it's interesting that they avoided arbitration with all these players. It could be nothing. It literally could be what I said earlier, is that they just had some agreeable players. John Middleton was like, yo, pay them what they want, or like be liberal with the amount of money we're going to spend there. Dave Dombrowski is a great negotiator, and they work it out. Like, that could have easily been the explanation, and I could be reading too much into this. You can let me know in the comments if you believe that I'm trying to make something out of nothing. But I don't know. I just don't feel that it's typical for every guy to end up avoiding arbitration. And to me, that feels like the Phillies are trying to knock out some of these smaller requirements of the offseason before maybe doing something bigger. Maybe an Alec Bohm trade. Maybe a big reliever signing. Carlos Estevez come back. Like, maybe this stuff gets done. I don't know. I don't have anything in particular, and we're going to talk more about this in the final segment of like what's next for the Philadelphia Phillies. I don't exactly know. I have some ideas that I'm going to break down for you, but it could be a big move. It could not be a big move. We did off the poll earlier this week, and we read the results to do you think Alec Bohm is going to be traded poll, and like 67%, 68% of responders said they don't think he's going to be moved. So I know where the fan base is at on this whole potential for a big move for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, I think some of that is pessimism because we're annoyed that the Phillies seem to be running it back, quote unquote. And even though they won 95 games in the division and second best record in baseball in the regular season, people all of a sudden want the whole team to change, which I get it from an emotional standpoint. But bottom line is this, like, they have knocked out just about everything they need to do ahead of the regular season. They're settling down all of their stuff. Like Hoffman is signed, so that's off the table now. Your bullpen's pretty set. You have one more position in the bullpen, but you're not going to go get Hoffman now. So if you want to bring someone back, it's Estevez. Maybe you trade for somebody. We already talked about why center field probably isn't changing. We already talked about why catcher, there's not really somebody out on the market that you'd want to bring in. Like, the options for the Philadelphia Phillies are dwindling down because we're in almost mid-January now. So that is kind of how this works. The closer you get to spring training, the less options you have, the more you want the roster to be set up. And while there could be something big coming still, there might not be. I don't know. They flip a coin. What do I know? They could do something crazy tomorrow. No, I hope they don't, because we got an Eagles playoff game tomorrow, and I'm going to be zoned in on that. But they could do something crazy in like a month. Who knows what the ups and downs of the offseason will bring. It's just when you see atypical stuff, like every player avoiding arbitration, that's something that, like, it should raise a red flag of just, that's not normal. Maybe it's coincidence. What could it possibly be setting up for? This is the way that I think, right? Like, I'm not going to see something that I think, well, that's interesting, and not try and figure out if there's a reason behind that if it points towards something for the Philadelphia Phillies. So with that in mind, if it is indeed trying to get their ducks in a row so that they can make other moves this offseason, well, let's talk about what those moves could be in the wake of the Jeff Hoffman signing with the Toronto Blue Jays. We will discuss what's next for the Philadelphia Phillies coming up next as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about FanDuel first, though, because from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So let's say you're done and you take $5 and you bet them on Green Bay tomorrow. Because there's no way Green Bay's knocking off Philly. Come on, not a shot. But let's say you do that. And then the Birds go out there and they smoke Green Bay by like 4,000 points. Well, guess what? You don't need to win that $5 bet. You're still going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, whether you win or lose. Whether you make the right bet, Philly, or the wrong bet. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit the website. Go ahead and check them out. I mean, they're awesome. They got a great app. The interface is so easy to use. I can't tell you enough great things about FanDuel, and I can't tell you enough great things about this time of year for sports gambling. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So what's next for the Phillies? A very simple question with somewhat of a complicated answer. It gets less complicated as the season goes along, or the offseason, I should say, goes along. So let's just recap what they have taken care of so far. So they have the infield lockdown. We talked about how the backup catcher position is probably not someone in free agency. It could be Rafael Marchand. It could be Garrett Stubbs again. If it's Garrett Stubbs again, I'm rioting like you guys. I think they need to change that position, but we'll see. We can get angry. Well, plenty of time to get angry about that when they make that call themselves. But for the time being, we don't know. But it seems like it's going to come in-house. Infield's locked down. Corner outfield spots seem to be Castellanos and Kepler. Center field seems to be either Brandon Marsh or Yohan Rojas. We talked earlier in the week about how, like, the top 10 list of center fielders, there's just nobody really special. There aren't that many special players when compared to other positions in baseball that play center, and there's certainly not that many that are available. Brandon Marsh was 6th on the list. Now, I think that was a little high, but it also shows you where the position is kind of at as far as skill in center field. So you're not going to get much better in center field, even if you go get like the best guys available. So probably going to be Marsh and Rojas splitting time in center. Starting rotation is set because you've got Wheeler, You've got Nola, you've got Suarez, you've got Sanchez, and you've got Luzardo with Painter waiting in the wings. And Joe Ross is a swing guy. And you've got all of these guys available in the minors, like that you could potentially call up that you had last year. You have Taijuan Walker still trying to earn a spot. Rotation's locked down. You don't need to add any more starting pitching. Bullpen, you pretty much have all your guys set. Romano, Ross, Banks, Alvarado, Kerkering, Strom. I'm missing somebody there that, please forgive me, I won't remember, but that's 6. There's one more name in there that's like a definitive. Oh, Jose Ruiz. That's a definitive guy that's going to be in the bullpen. So you have one more spot. There's a chance that the 26-man roster, 25 of those guys are already here. And we're in January. So the next thing you got to do, right? What's number one priority now for the Philadelphia Phillies is it seems like the Bohm trade feels less likely by the day. Well, you got to evaluate now. No Jeff Hoffman. Do you bring back Estevez? Do you go out and do you sign like the best reliever available on the market? Like, do you go get somebody that is a Jeff Hoffman level guy? And there's not really like another Jeff Hoffman level guy floating around out there. He's one of the best relievers in baseball right now. And he was one of, if not the best on the market in free agency this year. So you're not just going to replace him one for one. Well, unless the physical stuff that we were talking about shows that he's on the downswing or he has some major issue. And then maybe you will replace him with some on paper lesser pitcher who's going to actually be more valuable to you in the long run. But bottom line is you have to figure out who's in that 8th spot in the bullpen. I think the Phillies, too, the other thing that's interesting, like why they might have been waiting on that final spot in the bullpen, what they might have been waiting for is to see how other teams are going to react to Hoffman. Because let's say, right, the Phillies knew, well, there's something weird with his physical. We know he's got this issue. We know other teams are going to see it. So some teams might get scared off. They might get spooked by what they see on the physical. So what if Baltimore doesn't come to this deal? And they didn't. Then the price goes down. What if Toronto puts this deal on the table and then it falls through? Well, then the price goes down again. And then other teams start calling them and saying, yeah, well, why did your deal get ripped? And why did their deal get ripped? And why did neither of you guys end up signing this guy when there was deals signed and everything on the table, right? And then the physical comes out and other teams get scared. And the next thing you know, you're getting Jeff Hoffman to come back at a discount. Like that was a possible scenario. Now, what actually happened is Orioles said no, Blue Jays said yes, he gets signed. So that's not changing. He's a member of the Toronto Blue Jays now. So I'm not saying like, oh, the Blue Jays could rip up that contract. I'm just saying like the Phillies could have thought that, hey, let's see how many teams end up bailing on this because of the health concerns. And maybe we get him at a major discount. He's a super talented pitcher. And if you get him at a like big time discount based on his talent, you don't even worry about the physical stuff. You'll take the gamble. The less you have to risk, the better the gamble is. They could have been waiting for that. And now that they see that someone took Jeff Hoffman and he's no longer available, and that plan is not going to come to fruition for the Philadelphia Phillies, now they can fully let that go and say, okay, Hoffman's gone. He's off the table. Let's evaluate for real now what our next options are going to be. So bullpen final spot is 1A, right? That is the number one thing that you're going to do. Outside of that, I don't really think there's anything else crazy pressing. I mean, you'll bring guys in on minor league deals, I guess, and the Phillies have already done that with a couple of guys. So you'll add to like the depth. You'll get guys that'll spend the year in AAA. Maybe the next Jeff Hoffman's down there. Guys that are depth guys, you can still always work on stuff like that as far as that's concerned. There's an outside chance they go get another outfielder. I don't think it's likely, but they could. That is still the weakest point of their team. But outside of adding one more bullpen arm, the only other thing that you've got your eyes on for the rest of the offseason is, does Alec Bohm get traded? And as time goes on, it seems less and less likely. And a lot of you believe that, the majority of you believe that he's not going to get moved this offseason. So at some point, I'm going to give it a week for this to settle, because this could be like the dominoes start to fall, things happen quickly. Hoffman gone, so Phil's make a move quickly some point early this week for somebody. Like, I'm going to let the dust settle on this, just so we don't jump the gun if there's another move coming by the Phillies, by other teams, with the reliever market in response to the Jeff Hoffman thing. But we will at some point in the next week or so have the conversation about, well, if they're done, what is this offseason? Was it good enough? Because we're getting to that point where we have to come to terms with the Phillies may be done. And that might not be a bad thing, but that's a conversation for another day because our time is up for today's episode. A lot of big news in this one, so thank you for joining us here on Locked On Phillies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form. Hitting that subscribe button on the YouTube. Go to the Locked On Phillies channel. Subscribe. You get notifications when new episodes are posted. Yes, even Saturdays. If we get big news Friday, guess what? I'm waking up. I'm delaying whatever I'm doing Saturday so we can talk about Jeff Hoffman signing. So that's why you want to subscribe. You'll get notifications when new episodes are posted, whenever they're posted. So you're always up to date on the big Philadelphia Phillies news. All right, next time we will talk is on Monday. By the way, I'm putting out a tweet at LO_Phillies, and I'll retweet it from my handle at ConnorThomas975, which if you're watching on the YouTube, you can see right there. And we'll be able to, it's Mailbag Monday. So you can respond to that tweet with any questions you have on anything Philadelphia Phillies related. So go to that, respond for Mailbag Monday. Final segment of Monday's episode is going to be me responding to those tweet questions. Now, I will tell you this. Just being a fair fan, if the Philadelphia Eagles somehow lose tomorrow, that episode may be moved to Tuesday because I may be absolutely irate. But either Monday or Tuesday, I will talk to you on the next episode of Locked On Phillies. Go Birds.